Welcome everybody to Learn with Lowell. Today we're joined with Richard Flentge,
Yep.
and I pronounced the name right,
You did.
who's joining us today to talk about renewable energy, batteries, electric cars, all these great things that he's been working on for a great number of years. And I just want to join everybody in welcoming Richard to the show today.
It's good to be here. It's a beautiful day, and it's a great subject to be talking about. So
yeah, and if anyone's noticing the great accent, it's because he's from the South, which is nice to hear. You know, America has so many different accents. People assume that we sound like people sound like me. We're like the Midwesterners. So it's either me or you that people picture when they think of America, which is kind of cool.
I am right on the edge of the South. That's for sure. Yeah.
And then, so we were talking before, and you were telling me that you have some interesting tie-ins with Elon Musk and another individual. And so I just was going to point the mic at you and let me tell you about it.
Well, we started out, and the company was founded by an internet entrepreneur. His name was Jack Rickard, and he had written a lot about internet service providers. He was a magazine editor. So Elon Musk and actually several of the computer people followed him. So he started the video YouTube show, and this was in the early days of Tesla, and it was prior to them shipping any product. So this was before the Tesla Model S had ever shipped. And he had placed the deposit, which was $5,000. So he was going to do a show, and I was the co-host, and my angle was I was going to call Tesla up and ask them what happened to the $5,000 check, because every time we were trying to get delivery on the car, it got delayed. And Tesla had decided to become basically a computer answering machine. They didn't want any human interaction, and they still really don't. If you go to their service centers, they don't talk to people much. So I started calling and emailing Tesla, and I finally got a hold of somebody through a couple of levels. He wouldn't tell me his last name. He gave me the oh-he-ho. He just kept sending me back to the website. So we got on to do the show, and he was used to this, being a magazine editor and pushing people's buttons. So we started making fodder out of the fact that Tesla had our $5,000 check. We didn't know what was going on. We were hooting on Elon and asking questions, and we made this big sort of spectacle out of, we didn't know what happened to the $5,000 check. Well, we finished the show and posted it on YouTube, and I'm telling you what, I showed up, and it wasn't a day later, and that check showed up in Federal Express, and Elon sent the check back to us and canceled his deposit. So after that, we knew Elon was listening, and that was kind of that's my only brush with Elon Musk, but it was something, you know.
Yeah.
And he sent the check back, and we had to turn around and send it right back because he wanted the car. So.
Well, at least they didn't ban you. You know, if they were like, "Oh, we're tired of you harangued us a little too much," then we're not letting you on the system.
Yeah, no, we went right back in, and the guy was a big stock follower. And he talked a lot of people into buying Tesla stock early on, so he was hip on it.
I think if people bought Tesla stock and then when they first IPO'd to today, it's like, if you got like $1,000 in it, would be like 100,000 or something. Like it's a pretty good return.
No. It'd be $750,000. Well, if you put, if you'd bought 100 shares, you'd have probably $300,000 or $400,000 right now. So it went up. It way went up. You're right. Yes.
I think they're talking about splitting it to make it easier for the average buyer to actually feel like they own a share.
Split it twice. It's had a 5 split and a 3 split. So. But I did not buy enough. I unfortunately, it kept going up and down, and I just didn't want to take the risk.
Yeah. Well, we also have the recession to look forward to in the next 12 to 18 months. So that should get you some bargain deals there with the stock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe.
An opportunity. Yeah. Someone made an observation I was reading about where they said that recessions are where people with capital buy up things on discount, and then they just wait for it to go back up, and then they sell it. So like the recessions are like the stock going low, and like society is just like when it's on a high, they sell it, and it's just
That's a sage observation. That's exactly the way it works. Those wealthy people buy when everybody's selling, and they sell when everybody's buying. You got that right.
Yeah, it's so worth watching what they do, I guess. But then at the same time, most people aren't in a position to take advantage of it. Do you think that the amount of money that people had to put in to hold their car was a part of Tesla's success in the sense that they had more capital to roll with?
I believe that. Yeah, I would say that'd be a pretty honest assessment. Yeah, they had a pretty secure cash flow position. Yes, they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've done that with a lot of things. They sure have, and it's been successful.
It's really smart because it's basically free money with no interest on it.
Yep. And they also have exact demand numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not rolling the dice to see if somebody's going to buy what they offer.
Mm-hmm.
Everything they produce, they sold. So
yeah. And then tell me about JB Straubel.
JB Straubel was their chief technology officer, and he developed he built a Porsche, an electric Porsche, and he really developed the engineering for the Roadster. And so he had left Tesla, and the company I work for, we basically had hacked the Tesla Model S computer program, and we have a battery controller. And those lithium-ion batteries with the electronic battery management systems do not activate unless they are inside the computer of the car. So we developed basically a small computer box controller that spoofed the car. So JB Straubel ordered one of our controllers. And I saw his name, my ears turned red, and I'm all excited. And I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, I don't know if this guy's going to copy the product or what he's getting into our business. And so I wouldn't ship it. And I just sat on the order. I said, I don't know. And by God, he started emailing, and I got a chance to have, half a dozen emails back and forth with JB Straubel. And he ended up sharing stuff with us. We talked about a lot of things, and we sent him the product, and he hired one of our employees. So it's kind of cool. So he's at Redwood Materials, which is in Carson City, Nevada, and they're doing basically a recycling of the car batteries and lithium batteries, removing the precious metals and some of the chemicals. So there is some recycling going on with the batteries right now.
What is the benefit of spoofing to do that mechanism to spoof, just to reuse the batteries for other things?
Yeah. And and that's a very big issue in that none of these automakers and anybody that is working with these cars, they don't want to give up their programming. They are extremely protective of it. So that's where the term hacking comes in. Mm-hmm. So you have to have a computer area network sniffer. So you go in and you have a adapter port, and you read the computer program as it's operating the car, and then you catch a particular CAN message. So if it's a computer message for the brakes, say it starts with a B. If it's a computer program that runs the air conditioner, it starts with an AC or whatever. And then you capture the CAN message and you hack it out, and you take all the other messages out of it. And that's and it is it takes months, and it takes several engineers, and that's basically what we did, or what the crew there did. I was not capable of doing that, but we did have the adapters and the sniffers, and you would sit around all day and then try to see what messages you could read. And Tesla got pretty smart with it. They're more advanced software, and their systems have double messages. They have high speed messages. They have a very sophisticated computer program. So
what would you use? Yeah, what would you use them for?
the computer program?
No, I mean, so you have the batteries, you have this mechanism to retool them for something else. So then what would you use them for?
Most of them go for solar. Most of them, people to buy a solar battery is about $1,000 a kilowatt. And with a salvaged Tesla, you would come in at about 500. So the price was about half. And they're very durable, obviously, because they're in an automobile. And they're very high powerful. They're very dense. So we did solar. We did 1 or 2 computer backups where they would buy a large group of batteries. And then if there was ever a power outage, they would have enough juice to keep their main computers going. So and I saw quite a few of them.
What makes the Tesla battery special?
There are several things. One that I key in on, and a lot of people, the first thing you would need to know, the Tesla battery is not a big battery. It's thousands of small batteries. So it is a round cylinder. And Tesla developed their battery in a cylinder, and there was already a lot of machinery and technology to make batteries in a cylinder, because we've been making the little A's and C's and D's for all those years. So they smartly focused in on that. And then they fine-tuned it in that you take this material and you put the anode and the cathode, or the battery material, on a strip. And for a long time, you had to use solvents. So when you had to use solvents, the battery had to air out the solvents. Well, Tesla developed how you could do that mechanism dry, and that you could roll out these strips and roll up a battery in a rapid fashion with no harmful chemicals. And they can mass produce batteries better than anybody on earth right now. They can absolutely crank out. And it's, in the end, it's a whole lot of our renewable energy picture is going to be about batteries. So that's their big advantage. And then they know, they have tweaked it. They know how to make a very dense energy cell. So they're good at it.
I think I was watching a Shark Tank episode where Mark Cuban said that Tesla cars were basically just proving the market for Tesla batteries. So batteries are actually their special sauce.
You got it. That's actually the point of the whole book, and what I write. In the end, it's all about the battery. And batteries are going to be everywhere within 50 years, I'm sure.
This is more of those like facts and fictions. I don't know if you ever like watch Ripley's Believe It or Not, but somewhere on the internet they said that if you submerge a Tesla car or whatever in water, the batteries explode. Is this real? Is this fact or fiction?
No, unless they ground fault it. But now they have an entire system of fuses, and they have a giant. I don't think that would happen now. They have greatly advanced that battery now. But if it is live and it creates a fault and all that energy goes out, I mean, you've got a lot of energy. So they fuse them quite a bit now, so it's pretty safe.
What would it take to have a Tesla battery explode?
Well, what originally happened with the batteries basically was a cell would go bad. It would create a defective area. And the battery, it would be on the battery charger, and the battery, they would keep pumping energy into a area that couldn't handle it, and it would top out, and then it would fuse over to another cell. And then the other thing is the chemical compound generates its own oxygen. So it makes it sort of internal feeding battery. But
Mm.
they have greatly improved it. So, you hear a little bit about it from other devices, but generally it's almost always they've overcharged them.
Is
Too much energy.
do you stay up with like the Tesla shareholder meetings where they talk about the different advancements? I actually
Mhm.
enjoy them because they're so well done. They're like Apple ones where they talk
Yeah,
about the
I
details really
do.
well.
We watched them for years, and that was a quarterly ritual. We would stop work and we would put it on a big screen and watch it. And I did watch the last one where he talked about and they actually were pretty honest about lowering costs of production and removing some of the precious metals. And in a nutshell, they are gaining capabilities that's going to lower the cost of producing the car. And if they eliminate precious metals out of the motor system, that's a big hindrance as well, and still get a very efficient motor. So kind of they flashed a card that unless you were listening, you probably wouldn't have heard it, but they basically said the cost of producing this cars is going to continue to go down. And it's kind of like Apple. Apple kept getting a better and better iPhone, and they were getting more money out of it, and they kept making it. They actually started having it where they were producing it cheaper, and that's when you got a business, when you can make your product better at a lower cost and charge more for it. But yeah, that was my takeaway from the last shareholders meeting.
The people have used Tesla's model of making the Roadster an expensive premium product for a small segment of people, and then they making a cheaper product for a large number of people, like that process. I've heard that the phraseology and that process being discussed in so many different industries now, like cell agriculture, where people are growing stuff in labs, or vertical farming, or even mushroom culturing. Like it's all over the place. So it's kind of neat. I don't think that they invented or pioneered this idea, but it is neat to see more people use, because most people think I have to spend $5 million to make something that's like a nickel, when like a premium product is like $100. Like, sell it for a nickel when the premium product's for $100. So why not sell it for $100? Why spend $5 million to make the $100 thing and make so much more money than maybe making something that's a nickel? Like that, like it's like a weird priority.
They did it, and now they're drifting the other way. Now, I wrote in the book, I wrote a little bit about Honda, which my flip on your conversation is Honda did it the opposite. They put a motorcycle engine in the little Civic in the 70s, late 60s, and they came into the market at the very bottom. And they had the lowest price car they could get. And I kind of write that in the book. I'm like, boy, the door's open for a very low cost vehicle, because everybody is now hunkering on that luxury and high end market for EVs. But I don't know how big that pond is. How many people can afford $100,000 vehicle? So, but you nailed it. That's what they did.
There's a new push in rural America for people to ship over these Japanese little trucks. They're like the cutest little things.
Yeah.
But the safety ratings are terrible. You'll die in those things if you get hit or anything. But they're cheap. It's like a couple grand, and they'll work. They'll even have like a little
Lift
back
bed
thing.
stuff.
Thank you, lift bed. And so people are open to cheap, but it's like the trade-off. There's a reason why it's cheap. Like, it's not as safe. Like, those things are like tin cans.
If you're rolling hay bales down your gravel road, I mean, that's one thing. But yeah, being on a highway and you're going to need a pretty safe vehicle. But they in China, they don't regulate a whole lot of stuff. They have a whole lot of little vehicles and things that are not much more than a skeleton frame and a motor and a steering wheel. No speedometer, a brake and accelerator and a steering wheel. So, but yeah, I hear you. Now, there are a couple of little American companies that are kind of diddling in an electric pickup and that kind of concept. So,
yeah, I like Ford's version of the electric truck looks much nicer than the Cybertruck. But I think the Cybertruck's designed to look weird. It's one of those things where I think the idea is to make it look just ugly enough where it makes you want to talk about it. Where the Ford truck, it just feels like an electric American car truck.
You're
it
right.
looks pretty cool.
You are when you if you is app PC and Mac, Apple and Android or whatever.
Yeah,
they're two different mindsets. Now that was the biggest or web show I was ever on, was the Cybertruck debacle. And this guy, Mr. Rickard, was a magazine editor, and he watched that investors meeting when they broke the windows. Do you remember that a little bit? Okay.
Yeah, I watched it.
Well, anyhow, that ball hadn't rolled off the stage, and we had the camera set up. So he knew, because he had been a magazine editor, he knew to scoop that. And we went in and did a show and made banter out of it. And it ended up getting a lot of views. And my take on the Cybertruck was something that a lot of people don't think about, is it uses sheet technology. It uses XY, and a tremendous cost in automotive manufacturing is the metal forming, the forming of the fenders and the pressing of a truck bed is a very expensive process. And their ability to cut out flat sheets eliminates a lot of that. So
that's interesting.
Their exoskeleton. Yeah, it's a little different vehicle. But yeah, I would not call it, I wouldn't call it a beauty in sheet metal. I mean, it's a beast of some kind, but it'd probably be successful. It's going to be down there in Texas. So I like trucks there. So
it's a bit of an eyesore, but yeah, from the specs, it seems like it'll be good.
Yeah.
Going back to the shareholder meeting, I think in the last one they talked about how, and you mentioned this a minute ago, that they're getting rare earth metals out of it. I think they were saying, hopefully you'll correct me on this, that it was the drivetrain in particular, they were making it without magnets or rare earth metals. It was like the first type, like no one's ever been able to figure out how to make something this complicated doing this type of thing. I don't understand drivetrains. I just know that it it spins things and it's effective.
It actually is an enhanced electromagnetic system. And it you know how a magnet feels, it goes positive, negative, and if you put the ends together. Well, their motor is actually 3 poles that switch that very fast. And then the internal armature is magnetized. And so they make it high grade with these extra magnets, which enhances the magnetic field with these other metals, or the polarizations or whatever. And they somehow have developed an artificial process to duplicate what occurs naturally in the, whatever it is, neodymium or whatever the materials that they have. So, but they enhance both the battery chemistry and the motor chemistry with precious metals that makes it a more stable composition or whatever. That was a big deal. That crashed some of the battery stocks and some of these funds that held precious metal holdings. That was kind of an earth shaker. And I'll tell you what else accepting Ford and General Motors into their charging network. If you saw that over the last few weeks, that crashed a lot of charging stocks too. There were several companies that were heavily invested in trying to build a charge network. And if Tesla's going to fill that space, that was a game changer for 2 or 3 companies. Go ahead. No, I was just saying, that's how big Tesla's become. They're shaking the tree now. I mean, they shook the funding for battery suppliers, and now they've shaken the tree on the charging companies. They're moving other things in the stock just
Mhm.
by words they say, you know. So
I was reading that I think it's the drivetrain is one of the highest resale values of Tesla products, and that people like to take the drivetrain and like add it to other things like modding other cars or when they do rebuilds. Have you heard of this?
we've done it.
Okay.
I've been a part of several of them, and I would not call it an easy proposition.
Mm.
And I'll sort of give you the scenario. We would buy the wrecked Teslas, or we would buy parts of the salvage, and you would buy a sub clip. But after you hacked into it and got it to respond to your own software, like say on an accelerator, it was very difficult to control. So we had to develop with another company a slip differential, because we didn't have the sensitivity that Tesla had with their proprietary computer system. So when you touched the accelerator, it went from 0 to 60 in like 0.5 seconds. I mean, it spun and broke things. And I have a short story, a page in the book where we did a Tesla drivetrain, and the guy ripped the CV joints out of the vehicle because it transferred the power and the speed so fast to the drivetrain. But they're doing it, and it's a hot rod industry. But I'm telling you, it is no trivial task to control a Tesla drivetrain. I'm talking something that we would fiddle with for 5, 6, 8 days. I mean, it's not something, none of this stuff you can take out of the car and plug it in. You got to have a double E electrical engineer and bench testing and control, because everything transfers really into a code line. So you to accelerate, you increase amperage and you increase voltage. Well, that's all a mathematical formula of how it releases, and it's sophisticated. Now there's quite a few of the bills out. I mean, so, and we sold them. We actually had them on the website, and we had purchased them and sold them retail to car builders. And ended up, we took it down because the last one we sold was about a 6-week project, and it was just, if you were an individual and you wanted to do it, that's one thing. But as a business, to spend, put 200 and 300 labor hours into something that there wasn't a financial return on it. But there's a few guys in California getting a little closer. So
how much has someone ever paid for, like, I think of it as like jailbreaking a system, jailbreaking a drivetrain. No, well, how much do people pay? So the end result of the drivetrain being able to be applied to other things after you're done working out for 6 weeks, how much has someone paid for just that?
$16,000. But we sold them retail, $17,000. So, and they got a little bit of parts with that, maybe a foot pedal. That was about it. And man, the last one we sold, they showed up and we still all worked on it together. And they're like, we're not taking this thing till that motor moves. And we worked on it all week and came in on a Saturday to get it going. So it is no trivial process, but now there's a learning curve to it. And we were kind of early pioneers. So I think now they have sort of have a hijack control board and a little bit more hack software. So it's gotten a little bit better, but this was 5, 6 years ago.
What makes the Tesla drivetrain that is assume electric better and more efficient than like a car or diesel powered drivetrain? It's just the instantaneous of the electricity with the magnets making it so fast.
All sorts of things. We'll just go through a whole list. One is it has a magnitude of 30 less parts. It has a unigear, has one single gear drive. So that means you would control all of your speed, everything is simply controlled by a ratio of voltage and amperage. It doesn't have a reverse gear. You simply reverse the motor. And the complexity of, if you looked at like a Suburban, the drivetrain alone is 5,000 parts. The transmission is 6 gears to make it smoothly accelerate and to maintain power through that acceleration. It has sensors and all different kinds of things that require parts and maintenance. And the electric drive motor just completely eliminates that. And they look like I took them apart and looked at them 2 or 3 times, and they're like on some super smooth ball bearings. And it really looks like a little bit bigger than a coffee can, a little bit longer piece of copper. And then around it is the wound magnet, basically. So it's a very simple device, and it's very powerful. And now the other thing about Tesla, just so you're talking about it, they do the over-the-air updates. So I had a Tesla 3 for several years, and then you get a call from the car would get a call from Tesla, and they'd say, we're going to do a software update. Well, Tesla could take all the data from all the cars that were in operations. They could bring that data back, and then they could make decisions about it. So they could say, at 57 miles an hour, the amperage needs to be 32.4 instead of 29.8. I mean, they just have kept tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it to a point of optimization, basically. So, yeah, well,
the one thing that I've really enjoyed about Elon, as much as people on the internet like to give him crap nowadays, is his design minimalism when it comes to SpaceX or Tesla. Yeah, he quotes or he cites a French philosopher from the 1600s, but the basic idea is if delete it and see if you need it. And see,
right.
And it's like, I kind of like that. It's like I can DIY an MVP and it'll look like Dr. Seuss made it. But that's not, it's like, okay, that's neat. Now, how could I make it something so simple that it looks like just a coffee can with a ball bearing in it? Like, that's kind of beautiful. That's elegant.
And and he was fanatical about that. We were really following him. I was following him hard, probably in that, 2012 to 2018 time range. And there were a lot of stories that, he was in the factory sleeping. And, you'd get these kind of back channel conversations. He's like, why is that machine over there when that part is needed over here then? And he would, he'd stop the factory and he would go and unbolt stuff and put everything in order. So there was a high degree of efficiency. And that mindset is big. I mean, they are gaining in the assembly. And now they have the gigapress and the components of car assembly where they snap together almost a complete car in about 4 or 5 steps. I mean, they've changed it. And that's somewhat, I mean, that's kind of their threat or their intimidation on Detroit, which makes, some fairly complex. They're all cool vehicles. Everybody loves them. I mean, I'm all for them, but they're pretty complex to put together.
Detroit as in like an automotive manufacturing center?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. He's for example, the framing and stuff, the gigapress, the front half of the car and the back half of the car, they don't bolt together all that extra framing weld points, and they make it all one solid piece. And then the solid piece is also preset to take on the body panels. They put the 2 ends together, the drivetrain, the center of the car, and the 2 sides. And they basically have a 90% of the car built. So And that was a little bit of that was in the last investors meeting.
Mhm.
If you kind of parse through it, they do sort of talk about that. Now I follow a couple of the little podcasters and shows that talk a little bit about their engineering. So there's a few shows out there that do that.
Yeah, I like there's one that will break apart. They'll buy a really expensive car and then they tear it all apart and they talk about the manufacturing of the bolts and stuff. They were comparing it to Rivian, which I'm not a fan of Rivian because apparently they stole a lot from Tesla as they were leaving, which I think is unfair. But
so Lucid, Lucid's all Tesla too. So
but I've seen Rivians, but apparently like Rivians are as if an old style thinking engineer was trying to design something like a Tesla versus like a Tesla engineer designing something like a Tesla. So like even I was watching this YouTube video about it, and they have like weird bold like fastening points and stuff that it's like they would make the shell like a Tesla would make it visually, but then underneath the hood they'd have much more like riveting stuff that need to be done. So they have the efficiency of having it done in one go, but then they ruin the efficiency by having a process that requires more steps. So it's like it had an old new mentality, but the new was kind of like service level, even though they had all that information. But yeah, there's a YouTube out there. They break down like the battery packs. They rip that all stuff apart. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I like how detailed people get.
We did the first Model 3 teardown. So the Model 3 came out in 2018, and we watched. And as soon as the first wreck came up, we bought it within a couple months. And yes, there is a huge appetite for people watching a Tesla or any electric vehicle get torn apart. And some of those people get paid to do that. Mm-hmm. We did not get paid, but taking things apart, I guess, is just the manly thing to do. See, then you have a whole room full of parts, and we tore it apart. Now they really they have really changed their battery pack. So it is not very it's not very recyclably friendly now. It is, it has to remain really in a high voltage pack. If you try to break out the modules, they're in these really odd voltages like 90 and 98, and the positive and negative are on the opposite ends. So it's hard to wire. It's hard to mess with. And then now the later versions, they're filling in with structural foam or whatever. Mm-hmm. They have the bigger battery, and then it's all structured together. So if you had to work on that battery, you're going to have to drill through stuff almost to find it. So, but yeah, that's a big business. It'd be hard for me to saw apart a $100,000 vehicle, but they get paid. The one guy that does it, that Sandy Monroe, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he gets paid by the automakers, and they do everything. They measure how many wires they have. Oh, that's another thing came out of the Tesla shareholders. They want to go to a 48 volt subgroup. So we normally run everything in automobile on 12 volt systems, which the number one failure item on a Tesla, you know what it is? The 12 volt battery, the car battery they put in it. So anyhow, in electric vehicles, you have to drive the other systems at a much lower voltage. So they have converters, and taking 360 volts down to 12 volts, it's kind of hard. So they're going to change over to 48 volt. So their operating system is going to be 48 volt. And that would be another example. When you go to higher voltage, you go to lower amperage. And when you go to lower amperage, you can use smaller wires. So they're going to reduce some costing. And that's kind of what it gets down to. And that's what you're talking about. Well, this is a 4-foot wire, and it costs $1.42, and now it's going to cost $1.12. I mean, they're down to cutting the pennies out of everything they produce. So, but that's a big deal.
I had an idea for a product you might like. I saw this, people do this thing where they take their old phones and they disassemble it and then make like this drawing of how the parts come together. It's a lot of, so you get like the fun of taking something apart, but also like the science of like how everything works together. They're really cool. I'll send you a link to them.
Okay.
I think you, as someone who, enjoys taking things apart, all my old phones, I'm getting the little screwdriver stuff so I can do that, because it looks like a lot of fun. So I think it might be something you enjoy as well.
I'll do that. Yeah. And then you can see if you can get anything to power up. You got little meters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, we had a couple boards, printed circuit boards that we had bought out of China. And they were a lot of fun to deal with. And you would have to communicate with them and try to, basically it turns things on and off based on a parameter that you send it. But yeah, that's fun. Yeah.
And then I wanted to circle back on a couple points we made over the last few minutes, but why? So with the other automakers and how they were really bullish and competitors to what Tesla's doing, what is the value in allowing them on to the Tesla market for the renewable? Because I think like most Teslas, it's free for them. So then don't they have to add like a payment system?
It's only free for the first groupings of the Model S purchases. So some of the original people got lifetime charging, but that was the first few years. So everybody else is paying for it. Okay. Basically, it has a couple things. The secret sauce all along to Tesla was they had a nationwide charging network. Nobody really got that. I made several statements to that effect, and I kept barbing and poking at Detroit saying, you can build a great car, but if you can't drive it from here to Kansas City without if you got to stop and plug in and it takes 6 hours to charge, people are going to figure that out. Tesla has all through the Midwest and an entire web of charging stations now. Mm-hmm. Now, Detroit and really thought that these other companies were going to put together a charge network, but they floundered and they never did. So if you went out, and I traveled with the Model 3 and took trips, chargers wouldn't always work. You would go, there'd be people parked there. It just wasn't a system. The Tesla is a system. So Detroit finally capitulated, basically. And they're going to get an adapter to begin with. And they're going to have access to about half of them. But when they fuel up, they're going to be paying Tesla. Well, Tesla stock jumped $35 a share on that news. And Tesla, and that's one of the reasons they value it so high. Not only is a car company, it's going to be the gas station company too. And people, they're slow on the uptake, but nobody's getting the magnitude of what we spend on fuel. And as this market, if it cascades over into a large amount of electric vehicles, and Tesla's got by de facto the North American charging standard, their revenue stream is going to be huge. And it's not going to cost them anything. They're just going to sell electricity. There's some, I call it a tsunami. That's a big one. It may be the biggest one this year, probably.
And it all goes into their pockets versus every other automaker. There's literally, Chevron or whatever that's making that money. So if it's like $20 to fill up a tank of gas, and I can go like 200 miles, I think I can go like 250 miles on a tank of gas, and it's like $20 or something like that. These are like hard numbers. I haven't done this. I haven't filled up my gas. I don't travel all that much to look at my gas requirements. But how much? I think the battery packs now, I don't keep it to like 200, unless like there's an easier metric for you to like answer this question. But how much would it cost to go the comparable amount of distance? Like people make fun of the fact that it takes a while to charge up, but in terms of the cost to go the distance, isn't electric much more efficient compared to gas?
Much more efficient. $7 to go to a supercharger, which I did, and I got them billed. And I had a charge point account, so I went also to charge point only because I wanted to investigate as a journalist and just see it. So I did charge points same way, $6-7 to fill up. Yeah. And now a lot of people, if you understand lithium battery fill ups, the first 80% takes 8, 10, 12 minutes. And the last 20% takes 30 minutes. So if you manage yourself well, you just fill up to the 80% point, you can fill up pretty quickly and, get a $5 charge. So
what prevents it from, what prevents that, that dichotomy? Like what allows that to happen?
You would think about it as, let's say you were in a bar and it had all kinds of tables and chairs. So the first 50 people in the bar, it was very easy to find tables and chairs and sit down. Okay. The next 50 have to do a little bit of work, but the last 50, they get in a crowded bar, they have to look for places to sit. So the electron matrix fills up, and the electrons have to find a place to park to be held for the storage. So that's basically it. So the last electrons have to do a little bit more work.
Is lithium-ion the best base to build a battery off of, or are there other elements that would be better in your opinion?
Lithium-ion is far and away the runaway winner. We had this discussion for years. We bought other technologies, and nothing is, at least in a cost-effective manner, even close. So it's going to be lithium. And I believe that decision's been made. And they may improve it some, but it's going to be lithium. So
is it a limited resource, or can we get as much as we want?
As much as we want. The entire country of Afghanistan is lithium, basically. China's got a bunch of it. There's a bunch in South America. And we have pretty good reserves here in the US. So, yeah.
Is it possible to make synthetic lithium?
No, not that I'm aware of. No, never heard that.
Because those regions don't seem to be like in America all that much nowadays. So it'd be nice if we could divest of them.
That's exactly what I wrote in the book. I'm like, these are two areas, China and Afghanistan. There's a few spots on earth that aren't so hip on the US. And neither is the Middle East with oil, for that matter. So kind of when I talk about renewables, the one of the blogs that I had written, and it does kind of set the country free. If we can get self-derived batteries and we can get self-derived energy, it's going to be very stabilizing for the US. So we need it. So
yeah, I think talking about oil in the US, I think like 10, 20 years ago, no one would have thought that the US could be a net exporter of oil. And then some people have been like, well, why don't we tap more? And then, really control the market. It's like, I really like the idea of taking all the available, easily to get oil from every other place on the world, and then leaving ours for the last. Then ours will be a premium. Let's get the cheap stuff from everyone else.
Actually, that is not a new idea. Yeah, I mean, I know you're young. That's basically what they said in the 70s, the same thing.
With OPEC?
And with everybody. The what was called conventional wisdom. And the old statement was the last oil supply on earth is going to control the planet.
Yeah.
Basically, the same thing you said. Let's get everybody else's oil. And but the electric vehicle and the battery is a game changer. And that it does. If we once we get self-derived renewable energy, then we don't have anything else to worry about. There's not going to be anything to do. And if you break it down to a homeowner, homeowners that get their own energy are pretty darn free too. So, and
go ahead.
We had an off-grid facility, so we did not have any utility bills. We netted back. We had no fuel bills for several years. We drove all our vehicles on sunshine. So.
Do you like I think it's Tesla City, like their packs that they're putting into houses? Yeah.
They have a wall system. It's a backup. It's fairly small. And then now the Tesla City which is something that I write about, which I don't call it, I just call it a smart neighborhood, is actually a pretty advanced concept. And that's really the way it's going, in that not every house is going to put solar. Not every house is going to run a micro power plant, which in effect is, if you go off grid and you isolate your system, you are in effect running a micro grid. But if you had a neighborhood and they had an optimal place for a solar array, and you could capitalize the large inverters and enough battery storage, and then you could smartly interact with the homes, that's probably the advance that is really going to work. The city, the Tesla city, the small solar hubs that power multiple buildings.
Yeah. I think it fits within a larger structure. I've been thinking for some time that I think they were called victory gardens in the 40s when we were going to war with the Nazis and the Japanese, where people would have a center, that there'd be a place where everyone could go. And even modern urban design and city planning says that, like, you need a certain amount of green and parks within, like, you have to be like within 300 feet of a park, or else like people get like really crazy. And so it seems like there's a way to decentralize and allow there to be these little nucleuses for different communities that would bring people together, give them the renewables that they need, give them the independence that they would desire, and also like save money at the same time. So I like this. I like the synergy of going back to an old model that was true then that could be true now.
You absolutely nailed it. I couldn't have said it better myself. You got it. The urban centers, population centers that could have a centralized solar hub. The solar arrays could provide shade. You would have a little more biodiversity. And if once you have an exchangeable battery program, whether it's a small battery or the battery in the car, you could have people that could come out of energy poverty and be energy free. You got it. And that's the goal. And that's what really these forward-thinking people need to start discussing, which is a centralized, a lifestyle that centers around a hub, a solar hub, or a renewable source. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially with how outdated our energy system is in the United States, where you have like brownouts and dark zones and stuff. God. I wouldn't say where I live, but I have like I'll say I have an off-grid battery system for where I live. So if power goes down, I get to plug into it, and then my neighbors are like, why does he get to watch TV? It's a great feeling. I know it's like kind of a silly thing, but I like it a lot. When like, I don't like a lot when the power goes out, usually during the winter or whatever, but when it does happen and your stuff keeps working, it's a fun experience. But I would like that as well for the added insulation layer of, instead of being centralized where there's all these failure points that seems to happen, we could be just decentralized where like even communities could help each other and feed each other out.
Well, you nailed it again. That is exactly right. The grid, for all your listeners, that is the largest mechanical machinery on planet Earth, is the Eastern US grid. And the amount of power losses that go into that through resistance and transporting energy, nobody knows. And if you isolate it, if you cut the cord, broke the grid up, we would have a tremendous energy gain. And the way you do that will be with the large battery bank reserves and portable batteries and stuff. But yeah, you nailed it.
I forget what they're called. I think maybe they're capacitors or something there, but every now and again, there's like a little piece of land that has a bunch of kind of like battery looking things. It's for when things like blow up or something. Apparently that's 90% of the cost, but I was reading that like 15 years ago.
You need to understand that the electrical grid system is somewhat pressurized, very similar like a water system would be. So they keep it under pressure to deliver electricity. However, when that electricity flows and the time that it's needed, there's some spacing in there, and they have to have something that holds that electricity or does something with that charge to keep their system in balance. So all those systems are all these little substations are all over the U.S. And what it really amounts to is they're pumping a lot of power into that grid to keep it up. And it is a huge engineering mechanical device, a machinery of, and I write this in a book, and I don't think anybody really knows exactly what's going on. They just know it works. And I think they're afraid of some of this stuff, getting broke up. So
is there a country on the planet that has, like, who has the best energy grid? Is there one that's not reigning supreme?
I would probably some of the Northern European countries, Norway, which has a high generation of steam, electrical power, and I know Israel is pretty energy efficient, and they have a pretty strong solar presence. So they're a very isolated small grid. So there's a few, and the one point that I make in the book, and if we're going to move into that area, is this breaking up of the grid could be broken up by solar trains. So if you had large batteries on a train system, you wouldn't have those transmission lines. You wouldn't have the grid. You could simply drive the solar filled batteries from Arizona. You could go to the Chicago point where that grid is isolated, plug it in, and then have your solar power transported right there. So, and that's kind of what I see in the future. And I did a research book which was called The Grid. Obviously, one of the books I did when I wrote my book, and it is the legalese of getting across people's property and the long-term value and the obstacles. We're never going to get to a complex high voltage grid in much of the U.S. It would take forever. So that's why the portable better comes in.
Yeah, I do like the idea of, Chicago goes down for whatever reason, and you can just bring a train in as a lifeblood to keep it alive. Considering Chicago was, Chicago beat out Milwaukee and other different cities based on trains. It'd be kind of a nice symmetry there.
You got everything in place. I bet you're so young, you're going to see it in your lifetime. You write that, Dad. If I'll make a prediction, you will see some large solar battery trains pull into Chicago before you're done. So you don't have enough solar. You're too high up in latitude, and your angle is not that good. So you're going to be much better off bringing it in from somewhere else. It'd be a whole lot cheaper to have a battery train than it would be to build a giant solar array. So
does the type of train in terms of the speed affect, like if it was like a hypersonic one, it was like the ones in Japan, would that at all affect it?
It would be a slow train. It wouldn't matter. You would have it all. And that's one of the things that I write in the book and I talk about, which is the coal trains that come out of Wyoming. So a lot of people don't realize this. Wyoming has very low sulfur coal. So all the power plants that are near urban centers, they don't like that smell. Environmentalists complain about it. So what they do is they import coal from Wyoming. So literally every day, an entire grouping of coal-filled trains drive from Wyoming all the way to, say, Knoxville, Tennessee. They empty their coal out and they turn around and they go right back. So that the entire system is already in place. And instead of having coal on the train, just have batteries. I mean, it's a no-brainer fix. But yeah, we are transporting energy, and that's a big point. We're transporting electricity all over the place. So we're driving coal 2,200 miles, and they're making electricity, and it taps into that coal plant may tap into the grid, and then they move its electricity 600 or 800 miles away too. It's just it's a highly inefficient system, what we're under right now. Now it works, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes it works. If Texas went down recently, but it would also be more space efficient, so you'd have less cars, right? Because you could get more power. You need a lot more coal to generate power than you would just a battery full up of power, I think, right?
Right.
That was just that's an assumption. I haven't done the numbers.
And it's ready to use and it's clean. So that would be if you want to go to the last part of the scenario, we're pumping toxic material and particulate matter into our atmosphere at an astronomical rate. So a lot of people, you hear these alarmists, the climate people and world leaders. Okay. And what our media does is they parse out a very small soundbite and they never explain it in context. They don't allow the people to explain it. And they don't allow a lot of things to be explained. But think about this. There's 3 billion internal combustion engines on the planet. How many do you think are being driven at any given time? So let's pick a number. Let's say 300 million. Well, what that means is out of those tailpipes, not only is a cubic foot of gas coming out every second, but there's also small particulate matters that are coming out. So when you do the math, let's say it's 100,000 pounds of particulate every second. That's 1 million pounds every 10 seconds. That stuff's going somewhere. And if we continue to develop internal combustion engines, and the rest of the world is hungry for that. Africa, South America, India, the Middle East, they all want to drive cars. Driving a car is nice. So if we continue to add to that mathematics, we're going to continue to pour stuff into our environment one way or another. So they have a very valid point. It's not about science. It's about math. And inside of your gas fumes are unspent fuel. There's mercury, lead, sulfur, a few other chemicals I can't pronounce. It's going somewhere, and it's going somewhere on a pretty large scale. So that's why you hear these. Now, I don't make predictions, and I don't say, I'm not even really, too much of an alarmist, but I would say everybody would need to be aware of it, because especially somebody in the younger age, basically what's going to fix it is not having tailpipes. So that's where the electric vehicle comes in. So.
Yeah, and you eliminate people putting potatoes on them. That's what is sometimes done in the Midwest. For people are like, why do people do that?
Do you remember the potato gun? Do you ever remember those things?
Yeah, I made one.
I had a potato gun. So we had it at work, and everybody around was making these potato guns, and that thing would shoot a potato. We had a water tower near us. It'd shoot a potato all the way over that water tower. So then my buddy comes in and said, "That's it for the potato guns." And he was not paying attention, and he busted out the side of a car window with it. And it shattered the glass. So, heck, back in the day, you could put an afterburner in the 70s on the back of your tailpipe, and it'd blow like a flamethrower. When they had leaded gas and cars only got 6 miles to the gallon, guess where the other half of the gasoline went? Out the tailpipe. So you could you probably find it on old videos, but you would put a little lighter thing back there, and you could click it, and it'd blow flames out the back.
Since we're talking about the old days, I always wondered this. And so in the 70s show, it's a TV show about the 70s called The 70s Show. It's very circular, but they would go up to a water tower and sit on it and then look at the sunset. Do people actually do that? You can't do it now. They yell at you. I tried.
Yeah, no. I personally don't ever remember that. I mean, I was there in the 70s. Now, I certainly, we did a few crazy things though. We used to walk out on a train trestle. So there was a trestle that went over the Mississippi River, and it was not guarded, and you could just simply get on the train track and you could walk directly out into the open with no guardrails, looking down, seeing the water on the Mississippi River. So they had a few lax safety concerns back then, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys had lead in everything. It's like microplastics nowadays.
You're right. And I had, and I make a big point of that, but you're exactly right. They had commercials on TV about people eating lead paint. And that whole thing came about. They were mining silver and they ended up with this byproduct, lead. Well, as they cleaned or processed the silver, the lead spilled down into water tables and killed everything. And this was way back in the 20s, whatever. So those geniuses figured out, well, we'll just take the lead and we'll put it in other products. And like, it won't kill humans because it just killed all these thousands of fish in a river in Colorado. And they put it in, the only story I know about personally, well, a couple of them, people poke themselves with pencils. They put it in pencils. There was blood poisoning from that. They put it in wiring insulation. So like people would chew or mess around with a wire in their mouth, they'd get lead poisoning. It could migrate into the body. And yeah, it was, I have personal stories from lead poisoning. So
well,
it's a serious issue.
Talking about something much more cleaner, lithium-ion.
Yeah, that's right.
What a great transition. But
yeah,
I wanted to pose this idea to you. So if we imported enough lithium-ion to the United States and we were able to recycle it, is there a point where we have enough lithium-ion that we could just ignore the rest of the planet? Or is it not as renewable?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's almost like sand, dude. I mean, there's a lot of it. It's fairly easy. They dig it up and then they isolate it in these shallow ponds and it dries out and they can create it. So it's almost, it'd be almost like sand. So yeah, we'll be energy independent. The US is driving that way. And actually that's probably why some of these energy policies, and you hear some of the talk out of the government, they have the answers. So they probably are a little more confident in being aggressive in their posture because they basically, we know the technology works now. So it's,
what do you
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I said it's pushing people a little bit, but it's getting out of a comfort zone, but we have it right now to solve all our energy needs. No doubt about it.
Well, uncomfortable now, but even cheaper later, which,
right.
that's pretty powerful. More money in our pockets.
And now the rest of the coin in relationship to the way government works is they get a lot of revenue from the gas tax. So I got cornered. I talked with a local city official and they were putting in the charging stations. So I'm always Badinsky and, get out there and talk to people. And they're like, you realize we get a check, they get that tax revenue and it pays for the entire road crews. It pays for vehicle maintenance. It pays for employees. And it's a huge revenue source. So there's going to be some adjustment there. My argument was then just control the energy, make your own solar systems and sell the fuel as your revenue source. So
yeah, I think the other benefit is I think most gas stations, once a place has been a gas station, you can't grow anything there. Like it really destroys the value of the land. Yeah,
you got to pay a environmental service $300 or $400 to come out and dig a couple teaspoons out here and there and test it. You're exactly right.
Yeah,
it's toxic.
Yeah, so hopefully we won't have that problem. What do you think about onshoring? There's like this recent-ish trend where people are taking from China and Southeast Asia and they're moving it to places like Mexico or somewhere in America.
That would be a complex issue. I'm not some of it is valid in that we are a very prosperous nation. So having some distribution of our manufacturing stabilizes other parts of the world. So, I'm very much a patriotic, sovereign American, and I like that. But at the same time, we are on a globe with other people. So, sharing some prosperity with them, I think is a proper way to do it. So, and if they got good jobs there, they don't want to come here. So, kind of stabilizing.
Yeah, I think the only caveat, but I think we're mostly on the same page on this, is that as long as like they pay them and treat them in a fair way, like if there's like if we have a domestic industry that has all the labor laws that we have, and then it's competing with another industry that can essentially pay slave labor type wages, like with cobalt mining, for instance, like how they just treat people like slaves in that industry, then it's like it's unequal. And I feel like with business, you have to create an equal playing field, or else it's basically who's willing to stomach being more evil, and they usually win.
Well, that is the way of the world, son. So those are almost societal issues, and we hope we all are moving forward, and we hope prosperity is shared, and that future humans have a little more love in their heart, maybe. So they get past the greed part. Yeah.
Would you ever short Tesla stock like Bill Gates?
No, not at this point. At least not. No, I would. And I'm not a big Bill Gates fan. So and the prior owner, which did a lot of the internet stuff, wasn't a particularly Bill Gates fan. He's has proposed several times nuclear or fusion reactors and stuff, and that is extremely dangerous. And I would heartily remind people, you know not what you wrought if you have a widely dispersed amount of multiple nuclear facilities. There is some catastrophic event, and you have a radiation fallout that may contaminate the water supply of half the world, or the food supply, or radiate people. It's just way too dangerous. So we need to go renewable.
It does sound like another benefit of renewable is it doesn't prevent, but incentivize nuclear proliferation, because if everyone had to use nuclear plants to power their stuff, then everyone has the ability to potentially weaponize or like make uranium that is not good for people, like dirty bombs. But if we made if we templatized and made something really simple for people, you could export that to Africa or anyone else. They could have the benefits of it without having to go through like a century of like BS like we went through over the last 100 years with gas and other things.
You're right. And that would be
an added benefit.
That would be, and I kind of, if you would ask me about dreams, dreams of providing power to Africa, a very needy country, and allowing them to have electric vehicles and things like that, you would be exactly right. That would be ultimately you would want all humans to be in it to benefit all life on the planet. You got it. But I can tell you that Africa, which I have contacts in Africa, and they are a very needy world. They are a needy country. So, and they're one of the ones that kind of, when you talk about the environmental stuff, if they got churning out all gasoline cars over there, we'd have even more stuff in the atmosphere. So it may be best to help them. But they're a rugged country, rugged world, and in a lot of need there.
And then talking about books, I know we're coming to the end. You have yours. I think this conversation is a encapsulation of what you'd get from the book, but what other things would you want people to get out of reading your book? And then, if you could say the title for people who are just listening.
Verities of an Electric Mule. And I take real world experience in some of the early days of the EV adoption. So I tell that story. I talk a little bit about transportation, energy, the history of it and how simple it was a couple hundred years ago, how far we've come really in a couple hundred years. So it has a little bit of history. And then I also have a little bit of climate change information so you understand it, like my scenario, how much is coming out of tailpipes. I did a story on polar bears, so and the bees, and then I give answers. So I have some of my product concepts, the smart home, smart neighborhood, how we can, on the micro level, change our relationship with energy. So the book is very concise. It covers a wide range, and it goes from electric vehicles to climate change to solar. I tell a few jokes in there every once in a while, so I try to make it a little bit humorous. So, but it was a very, very strong effort on my part. So,
is there a platform in particular that you want me to link to in the show notes to the book?
Just my website,
Okay, right to your website.
richardflenge.com. I do blogs, so people can go and read part of the book for free, you know. And I sometimes do little short micro videos and stuff like that. So, and I do it. I mean, I had a very unique experience. I was very fortunate for that. And I was with a facility that had the money to really fund a lot of private research. So I like sharing that. Most people with my level of experience would be in a corporation. They probably had to sign non-disclosure agreements so they couldn't talk about it. So,
yeah, I hate NDAs.
Yeah.
I hate NDAs.
Yeah. NDAs. That's yeah. And I've had a couple sniff my way, but I never quite signed the paperwork. But
yeah, I haven't signed an NDA in like 6 years. Yeah. And as I was leaving the place, they had me sign an NDA as I was coming in. They wanted me to send an NDA as I was leaving, and I was like, not for the money you're offering me. You guys did so many illegal things. Like, no, I'm open for someone coming in and having a conversation with me if you're for this amount of money. It's just nice to be able to talk.
Yeah, it is. You're right. And that's all I want to do. And my ideas are free, and I don't have to buy equipment and maintain a facility. I mean, so it's really just it's a communication document. I hope it bridges people a little bit, get them a little more comfortable with electric vehicles and kind of see the future. So that was really the point of the book.
What other books would you recommend people check out? One for you would be Edison by Edmund Morris. I think you'd like that.
Okay.
But yeah, what books would you recommend to us to check out?
One was Big Coal. The one by Bach, Bakke, it's called The Grid. Feats of Engineering. There's another book that I read for this. That's all I can come up with off the top of my head.
Well, those are good ones. I'll check them out. I'd like to read it.
I have the bibliography in the book. So
okay, sweet. Then what are there? I forgot to ask this, and it's in my notes. Are there alternative? It just seems like Tesla's doing all the good stuff. Is there anyone out there outside of Tesla, like lesser known people doing good work in this field? They want. Yeah,
I would say Ford is pretty well along. Ford has probably the strongest position. All of the automakers are very, very sharp when it comes to engineers. So Tesla has a position, basically what I would say in time. They may be 5 or 6 years ahead of them, but these other companies, they have massive amounts of engineers. The other big one on earth is BYD out of China, and they have some incredible engineering also. So there is, if you would say at 2018, I would have said Tesla had a 6 or 8 year time gap on their competitors. And, at this point, it may be narrowing down to a 2 or 3 year gap. So that I can tell you that the auto industry is producing a massive amount of cars compared to Tesla. You're talking about operations. Well, Toyota is 9 million vehicles. 9 million a year. And those are complex devices. And that is a lot of humans working together. So you are talking about some big hosses in manufacturing. And when their wheels may be turning slow, but when they get the gears grinding, they're going to overwhelm this world with electric vehicles. I can assure you, because they can put Tesla maybe can put 300 engineers on something. General Motors or Ford can put 3,000. I mean, they got a lot of employees and they got a lot of brain power, which oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say how many Teslas are going out. I think it's like a million a year or something like that. Like they're not up to a lot.
They're not quite there, but they may be up.
I think it's like quarter million
a quarter. Yeah. They're getting up there. I mean, I remember a report when it was 30, and I wrote it in the book and made a point when it was 31,000 a year. And that was a point of celebration for us on the show. But the magnitude of these other car companies is just, they are, like I said, when you talk about making 4 or 5 million or 6 million of something, that's a lot of numbers of something that big. So they have a huge industry. I went to lunch. I got to go out with some of the Ford engineers years ago. And, they didn't give me trade secrets or anything, but they have an electrical center. They know it works. They know what they got. And I'd say some of it is fear of cannibalizing some of their other. It's a delicate balance, because if they switched everything over to these simple vehicles that lasted for 300,000 miles, that cost, it could tip their Apple card. It could disrupt the whole industry. So we just got to phase in the positives and phase out the negatives, I guess.
Are the rumors of an Apple electric car real?
They're real. I'm sure they're real. Now maybe $300,000. And I looked at one the other day. They have the money to do it. They absolutely have the money to do it. And I'm sure there's an Apple car sitting somewhere.
Yeah, I was reading that it's just a rumor, but that people have been starting getting hired into Apple with those specialities. It's like, what else would they be doing? Is kind of the rumor. Is there more than that substantiates it? Because from what I was understanding, it's like they hired the people that would build like a Tesla type setup. So like, it seems, what else would they be doing?
It's all in China. I can assure you they have working models right now as we speak. Somebody's driving around inside something of a concept Apple car, and they do that. Yeah, absolutely. And it all applies. The same thing basically applies to the phone or to Tesla, or whatever. These, in making things out of electronics, the farther you go down the road, the lower and the lower the cost scale gets, and the generational intelligence becomes better and better. So yeah, I'm sure there's an Apple car somewhere, I would predict. And they have the rumor I heard was that they polled Apple product owners and 25% of them said they would buy an Apple car. So.
Yeah, I know I think it was like 2008 or 2010 when Tesla was not doing well. 2008 or 2018 or whatever. I think there was an 8 in the year.
Yeah,
but
8, yeah.
Where it wasn't doing well. And I just kept telling all my friends, like, I think Apple should buy them. Apple should buy it, because it looks like an iPhone with wheels. It's
You're
like
right.
It just feels right. But
everybody talked about that. Now to finish that sentence, you're exactly right. Except that's when Elon bucked up the money. See, so he put his own bet on himself, and that's why he's the richest person on earth. In the normal situation, you would bring in that extra cash from outside investors, and then they would hold warrants and stock positions and options on the future of the company. And Elon kept that scenario from happening with his own personal investment. So he made a heck of a good bet.
Yeah, it's definitely worked out for him. Just finishing on the Apple car, it needs a cool name. Is there anything that you bet would be in it? I know we're going. I actually probably should wrap up.
That's okay. Yeah, they will have all the gizmos. I'm sure it will integrate into everything that already is Apple, and it will have a giant communication system. And I've heard that they will have automated charging, those kind of things. So
yeah, well,
they'll try to advance it. Yeah.
Sounds fascinating. Just as like the last question I was asking people is like, when you want to go, where do you go to learn about these things? Where are the sources, the watering holes that you go to for someone on the internet listening? It's like, oh, this sounds really fascinating. I want to know what the advances in the Apple car or Tesla car, et cetera. Where would you go for renewable enthusiasts?
I go all on YouTube, basically. There's 2 or 3. I follow a company that does SPAN, SPAN, and they do smart breaker boxes. So they are at the front of really the smart energy interactions. There is a buku of small solar guys. I follow a guy that does, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but he does battery testing. So I follow a lot. I basically follow battery testing for the most part. And if you would ask me to sum it all up, it still really is going to core around battery technology. So I mostly get on YouTube and look at battery videos, and tearing the cars apart is somewhat fun. That guy is Sandy Monroe. And then I also, now the other guy that I'm friends with is Pete Gruber at Gruber Motors out in Phoenix, Arizona. And he has a lot of tech stuff. He is a savvy guy, and he is the world's only Tesla Roadster shop. So he does a lot of videos, and he's one of my favorite guys, probably. So I chit chat with him every once in a while. So
I'll have to check that. I'll have to check them out.
Gurber.
Everyone, thanks for listening. If you like this, or if you would like to see Richard come back on and maybe do like a live stream of breakdown of like a Tesla stock thing or whatever, maybe we can do something else in the future, basically. But thanks for coming on today.
All right. Well, I really enjoyed it, and I certainly have the gift of gabs. It was really good for me too, and I appreciate you.